particular data center, because they're not all the same. And that's the truth. Some use a polluted water system. They recycle their water. Some use more power than others. Some hire more people than others. So there's so many different elements and different types, and I'm going to let Joe get into that, so that we'll talk through this. So as we go along, you will also see me interjecting. He's used to it, so don't feel sorry for him. I'm just that type of person because I'm thinking with my economic development hat, and I'm trying to think of the questions that y'all might be having in your heads. So just expect that from me. So anyway, Joe Moore's here with me. He works with our data energy team as well as infrastructure and as well as getting his doctorate in community development. Not only is he an engineer, he is also a previous town manager for Brevard and Zebulon, so both North Carolina counties. And he helped assist bring the Zebulon data center to that area. So we actually have a true life case study here to discuss tonight. So I think that's great. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe. And like I said, you'll hear me interject, but please ask questions as we go along. Stop us, because that's what we're here for.
Thank you, Kelly. And thank you for having us, and also thank you for investing the time to learn about what is a complex, it would be a seemingly complex decision, but when you break it down, my hope, my intent is to make it easier and more digestible for you. So again, that's where we are, and we worked together quite a bit, so I am used to the interruptions, so yes, don't feel sorry for me, but also that extends to you all. Question comes up, even though we will have a period at the end for questions and answers. Anytime you want to ask a question or you need clarification, just let me know. What I'm hoping to cover tonight, I'm hoping to cover these topics that I want to put data centers in the context of all industries. In all industries, whether they're textiles or advanced manufacturing or biopharmaceutical, while it's hard to imagine this, they all move around. And they move around for different reasons. So I'm going to talk briefly about why industries move around, and then I'm going to dive into the specifics about why data centers are moving around specifically into North Carolina. And then I'll share with you, as Kelly mentioned, I was a town manager in Zebulon for 9 years, and we shepherded in a data center into the town of Zebulon. We learned some lessons from that, and I want to share some lessons. It wasn't all bad, it was just how to be more proactive when the next opportunity came knocking at the door. And again, I'm repeating myself, anytime you have questions you want to ask. We'll have some period at the end, and we hope to leave you with some recommended next steps so you all can start that community conversation. All right, so data centers, they are coming. How did we get here? Let me talk first a little bit about what is North Carolina's traditional industries. The big three, textiles, tobacco, and furniture, they weren't always here. They came from other places. So as an example, textiles was a cottage industry in India and Africa, and it became a mass production industry in England before they moved it to the northeast of this country, which is why that section of this country is called New England. And then they came south, and then they went to Central America, and now they're overseas. And they're all chasing different things. So in the case of the historic industries, they came here because they were looking for water. They were looking for water to help them with the product that they were developing, but also the power that water generates. So the Catawba River Valley, the Yadkin River Valley are really good examples of water used, dammed up, and creating energy. Also, the state of North Carolina did a really good job of investing in infrastructure, first in railroads and then in highways. So that was a big attraction to bring those industries so they could bring their supplies in and get them shipped out to market. And then also, from a production standpoint, the state had land and labor. So for the better part of the last century, that was our dominant industries. That's no longer the case, because those industries have moved on, and other industries are starting to emerge. We're seeing a lot of advanced manufacturing, like the robotics, aerospace industry, global transport. You're seeing them get more into advanced manufacturing, biopharmaceutical, heavy in the Research Triangle Park area. And as we're seeing, and you all have heard, we're talking more and more and seeing more and more of the emergence of data centers. So, quick snapshot about why I just talked and showed graphically about how industries are changing. This is a graphical representation. So, as early as 1990, you can see the drops in those traditional industries. So, the furniture dropped about 60,000 people in 30 years. You see fabric dropped about the same. Tobacco had about 20,000, and by 2020, it has effectively bottomed out. But what we're starting to see is the emergence is we're starting to see aerospace, which is a really good example of advanced manufacturing. But we're also seeing those energy-related industries like semiconductors and batteries start to rise. Granted, these population numbers don't equal what these were, but the trajectory is the same. Right? And so this really is a reflection of somebody lost jobs here, and somebody's gaining jobs. And so one of the things that I want to share with you is how do you put yourself in a position to be the receiving end of those jobs, whatever type of industry you choose, or as Kelly mentioned, tourism is a type of industry as well. So this is what site selectors and site selectors are, people that are hired by industries to scour the globe looking for sites for their clients. And this is what they call the funnel. And the funnel is nothing more than a quick assessment of where their clients might go. It's dependent upon what type of resources and regulations are at the state level, the regional level, and the local level. So at the state level, if the corporate tax rate is something at the state level that is acceptable, is promising, is not detrimental to an industry, then that industry stays in the funnel. And then that site selector goes to the next level, which is regional, where they're looking for, do they have the workforce, meaning do they have the number, do they have the skill sets, is there housing for that workforce? And then they finally get down to the local level, and this is where you all have all of the control, okay? So some of these things at the regional level, you're a marginal player. State, not so much. But this is where you're going to have all your control. And so I'm going to walk you through how you can use that control to your best advantage to incentivize and attract what you want and disincentivize what you don't want. And what I've highlighted here is when it comes to data centers, they are really driven by power and connectivity. Connectivity is.
Oh, I was just asking him if he knew if we
We
were
were
going to
curious, will
slide.
the slides be available?
Yes, absolutely.
Determines how many notes I copy and.
I'm going to take your chance.
Okay, good deal. All right, thank you.
So power, I think that's self-explanatory. For data centers, they consume a lot of power. Okay, but maybe even more important than that, they need connectivity. So they need connectivity in most layman terms. They need to be able to connect to the internet, broadband or fiber. Broadband fiber. Down here, this is where, again, you have the most control. So do you have buildings available for whatever industry? Do you have sites available? Do you have the number of acres? Is that site in a good location? Like, is it near a data line, or is it near a highway? Is it flat enough to be developed? One thing to also keep in mind is, while it might be enough acres in total acres, how much of that is usable? So a lot of land can be eaten up by wetlands. A lot of land can be eaten up by hilly terrain. And so what is a 50-acre site may, at the end of the day, be a 10-acre site. So the number of buildings, but more importantly, what sites do you have available? What kind of water and sewer capacity do you have to offer? And this is the most critical thing, the most important thing that you have control over. That I'll give you some examples to start thinking about is, what does your permitting process look like? So when someone...
I also think it's really important to say that sometimes when these data center companies are looking, they may say, we need 1,000 acres, okay? That is the typical conversation that so many people are having these days. They may not really need 1,000 acres, they may need 200 300. But they always start larger and work their way down. So just keep that in mind as you're going through this process of conversation. And I think that's really important to make sure you have the right fit. And I would also say, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about this incentive piece too, but it is very important for the community and elected officials and the leaders of the county to talk about the incentive package. Now, Joe's getting ready to explain a concept that is unheard of in most places, is that one that they didn't ask for themselves. That's great. But typically speaking, and I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, they are going to ask about it. So these are some of the things that you have to talk about.
So next slide, I want to talk a little bit about an example of regional criteria, and then I'll give some examples about local criteria. At the end of the day, site selection, again, they're scouring the earth for their client, and they're looking very quickly to say no. They're looking for a way to kick you out. They're not looking to keep you in. They're moving on. And so if the state resources and regulations checks the box, they move down to regional, and they move down to local. So again, some examples of that. So when we're talking about advanced manufacturing, the regional criteria, workforce being an example I pulled out. For advanced manufacturing, we're looking for a specialized workforce. Workforce that has the skills and some education to deal and work in situations like this. Biopharmaceutical, highly skilled workforce, higher education level, and also from a utility standpoint uses a lot of water. A lot of water to create the medicine pills, but also they have a lot of effluent or waste. And so it's not only that you have to have a lot of water capacity, you have to have a lot of sewer treatment capacity. Data center, less so on the number of workforce. You gotta have power, a lot of power. They use a lot of water. Some of the data centers are coming up with ways to work around the consumption of water. But again, the big driver is, do they have access to your internet? So over the past year, 368 companies have located in the state of North Carolina. This is a broad overview of them. So I'll just touch on the ones that, example, the industry, the energy industry. There's 52 projects of the 368. Those site selectors kept them in the funnel and they landed in this state. While energy represents a lot of different types of industries, the median number of jobs that came with that was 200. The amount of investment, and this investment could be in the building and the land, but also in the equipment. And the equipment investment when it comes to data centers is going to be really important consideration for y'all. And then the median wages for energy was a little over 62,000. So again, this slide will be available for you. This is from the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, talking about all the industries that came here, the jobs, investment, and wages associated with all of them. So those are examples of who stayed in the funnel this last year. As far as what they brought, manufacturing and assembly, that has a lot of different types of manufacturing and assembly. So there's biopharmaceuticals in there, advanced manufacturing, but more your traditional. The reason I'm showing this to you is because the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, EDPNC, highlighted and pulled out data sets. So this is, I think, a good thing for you all to keep in mind, because at the end of the day, you're going to be weighing revenue and jobs. And when you look at data centers, median number of jobs, comparatively speaking, on the lower side, but they invest a lot of money into your community. And as I'll point out later when I talk about integrity, that represents a sizable, significant amount of tax revenue coming into your community. Okay. Let me pause there just to see if there's any questions before I go on to the next section.
Yeah, I mean, I got the notes stuff.
Okay, you want to
But
wait?
I don't want to interrupt that. I appreciate what y'all are doing. It seems like y'all said it's going to be neutral. It seems more like the pro positive economic development side of it. And I kind of get that, trying to be hoping for, the counties to consider it. But I mean, I just sat through the day up in Virginia, all the county and city managers talking about data centers, drawbacks, et cetera. One of the things they talked about was the revenue that people claim potentially coming doesn't happen, offering tax incentives is a losing battle long term. And you can comment on that. They talked about jobs, that the jobs, there's not really that many jobs coming to these. And so that's everything. They did say though that the sewer, almost all the centers now are coming through with the water reuse. There's relatively minimal to no sewer capacity necessary for them. They talked about this, what you said about the common lines, is where we're so far away from most of the major common routes that we would be fairly viable. Power requirements, we talked about that, talked about the minimum power in a 2-year lead time on most of the medium to larger size transformers at the minimum, but it sounds like it's probably a bigger line now than just a 2-year thing. I mean, can you give us more of that kind of detail about these?
I promise I'm going to get into it, and I will touch on all those. And if I don't, then you can just circle back. But hearing what your concerns are, I'm confident in touching all
I
of
think
those.
a lot, just, I think speak for everything.
Yeah, I think that's
A lot of
next
people are
section,
very
next
interested in
section,
getting
we'll
into the
probably
detail.
bring it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're about to get there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what is driving data centers in general. We use these a lot, but also our records are stored. Health records, as an example, are stored. We use our devices as a way to get from one place to the other. Our infrastructure, transportation, traffic, water, have become more reliant on using data. Our financial transactions, things that we store in the cloud, our communication, when we buy tickets, all those things are energized and made possible through data centers. So that's what's driving the demand. Now, I mentioned to you previously about how industries in general move around, so are data centers. And what they're doing is they're chasing power and connectivity. So they started right here in Northern Virginia, also known as Data Center Alley, and they started migrating south into the central part of Virginia. And then when they were reaching capacity there, they jumped to the Atlanta area and have been moving up the I-85 corridor into the Charlotte area, and then already moved. And as far as where they are populating in states, Virginia, as I just probably would have suspected, is the one with the most number of currently operating and planned data centers at 685. Texas comes in next. North Carolina is down here at 113, where of those 113, 72 are currently operating and 41 are planned. I was at a seminar last week, and the county manager came up with a phrase that I liked, is that data centers have been around us for a long time. They've been like free-range data centers, but we haven't noticed them. They've been associated with specific enterprises, which is an example of what I'm going to show you in Zeppelin. They're tied to a particular company, like American Express, BB&T, and Truist, but now they're getting much bigger because they're not just for a specific business. They're helping several businesses run several operations. And so there's 72 that are on the ground here, 41 are planned. Of the ones that are currently operating, 87% are in urban areas, 13 are in rural, and those that are planned, 33% are planned for urban areas, and 67% are planned for rural areas. They are not all the same, as Kelly alluded to. The ones that are grabbing a lot of headlines are down here, the hyperscale range. The one that I'm going to talk to you about in Zeppelin is an enterprise data center. And while what I'm going to share with you is probably on the higher end of the scale and square foot, at the end of the day, it's still an enterprise because it is run for and by BB&T and Truist. And as Kelly mentioned, if you all have an interest in this, our energy division can get in much greater detail with you, but I wanted to just give you a sense that it's not one size fits all. All right, so as you all are aware, you've called a timeout, and you've got a time limit associated with that. So what I'm hoping to transition into is to put you into a place where you can decide if you want them, what type of regulations you'll have. If you don't want them, what are some regulations that you can put in place that disincentivize or makes it really hard? So I've shown here, this is my rough approximation of I-85. And you can see the moratoriums that have been declared, and this is a week, maybe 2 weeks old, so some other jurisdictions may have declared moratoriums, and this is not for, although there are counties in here, if if a municipality within that county declared a moratorium, this graph shows that. So you can see that the typical path of where data centers are going, that it runs through and near some counties or municipalities that have declared a moratorium. But this is not a hard and fast rule that they're going to locate along or near I-85. There is a place that's close enough to a dense network, the internet, as I was talking about, and there is energy, as an example with the old furniture industry that has picked up and moved on and left a lot of unused energy available, as an example, in the Catawba River Valley. Then a data center like Google can locate outside of this portal, as they have done. And you can see Watauga County, which is home down Washington. I suspect you all like the purple and gold, not so much the black and gold, but they have declared a moratorium. Is it reasonable to expect that a hyperscale data center is going to come there? I would suspect not, given the amount of land, flat land that's needed, but it's entirely reasonable to expect something like an edge or an enterprise data center to come along. So they wisely, as you all have done, declared the timeout to figure things out so they're prepared. And if a data center comes knocking, and again, to your point, that may be not a reality. If there's not the power there and there's not the data, this might not be a prime market. But what I would suggest for y'all to consider is you don't want to leave it to chance. In case they do show up, you're at least prepared. And so that's what I wanted to walk you through. So the 5 criteria, the 3 that you have control over: water, sewer, permitting, and building sites. And then the 2 that you don't have control over, but data centers care a lot about, which is power and connectivity. I wanted to walk you through what those could look like by talking about what we did in the town. At the end of the day, write the regulations that you write in order to attract what you want and disincentivize what you don't. You can't just say no or have a moratorium forever. But you do have to have a plan, and you can influence the market by the rules and the regulations that you write. So, I'm talking about what we experienced in the town. Again, it was an enterprise data center, put in by BB&T, now Truist. I'm going to walk you through what the footprint and the acreage of that looked like. I'm going to share with you what the investment and the jobs look like. And then I'm going to walk you through some lessons that we learned. And one was we recognized that we didn't have any development standards for a data center. And while the data center went in, and I think we did a reasonable job on doing things like putting in buffers and having it put in a part of town where it would not adversely impact residents. We needed to get more specific in case another data center came available. And then that led into a greater conversation that we had where effectively we talked about what was our goal for the future, what type of industry, what type of employment, did we want to see, and then that led to our comprehensive plans that we were able to use to do things like, okay, if you're a data center, these are the rules and regulations you have to follow, and this is where you can go. If you're something that we're much more interested in, here's the process you follow, and this is where you can go, a number of places. And we also talked about for those developments, could be a data center, but it could apply to residential subdivisions as well. If you were going to come into our community and adversely impact it, then you had to do some things to offset that. So examples being, and I'll stick with residential subdivisions, that's the primary example of this, but data centers can have some application here as well, is that if you're going to produce a lot of traffic, we need you to widen the roads in front of your development. We need you to pay impact fees to help us finance the traffic signals that need to go up as a specific example.
Yeah, also, this is where a community reinvestment package comes in. If a data center or advanced manufacturing wants to come into your area and they potentially are asking for any grant tax incentives, you need to put a community reinvestment or discuss it about them reinvesting back into the community. This is an actual document and an agreement with the company that's coming into the area. This protects your community. This allows you to get things for your public safety, to get things for your schools and your education, or whatever bucket that is important to you. And I also want to touch on a question that he asked, because it's in my mind, and I was just talking to someone about this today. When a data center reaches out to the county or to someone in your community, there are people that are developers, and then there are data centers. So they are two different entities, okay? Sometimes these developers are wannabe data centers, which means what they want to do is put options on your land and tie it up, and the process never happens. It never happens. So you have legitimate data centers, and so we actually maintain a list. So I encourage, and I'm going to just assume that either your planning department or Lisa will probably be the first point of contact, and it could be Scott, but regardless of who it is, let's check that name on the registry and say, okay, this person's legitimate or not. And that's one of the reasons that most of them are not happy with it. That, and of course, we're going to talk about the equipment, because that's the other reason.
All right, so I am going to walk you through this. But I want to touch on this real quick. So I gave you an example of a residential subdivision coming into. They produce a lot of traffic. And so a way to have an impact fee associated with that type of development is a traffic impact fee. Similarly, if you have an industry, biopharmaceutical, data centers, use a lot of water, this could be an area where you have an impact fee associated with your utilities. Like, we are going to need to expand our water plant, so you have to pay your portion to get that plant upgraded, because otherwise, without you, we would not be. So they'll walk through some specifics. So as far as the employment and the investment, so this is the site in Erie. This is Highway 64. This is an area that can't be developed. It's going to be right next to the city of Raleigh's watershed. So this is not facing residences. This is the site on a 50-acre piece of property. While it's 50 acres, a lot of it's consumed by other things that are not buildable. So a lot of wetlands down in here. Also, one of the requirements that we have is anytime you have stormwater runoff, you have to have a place where that water can be collected and roots settle out before it's released to the stream. So that's not an area that you can develop. But you can see the 123,000 square foot facility, they've got a pad to expand upon. Now, as far as the investment, the building itself came in, its current value about a year ago is $83.5 million. So that's the value of the building and the land that the property tax is applied to. As far as the personal value, that is the value of the pieces of equipment inside the building. So in effect, these are the places for the very expensive servers to process all that data. The equipment, as you can see, is much more expensive than the value of the property and land. And that came in at 200, or is currently valued at $280.3 million. The thing to keep in mind is that while this has a high initial value, it depreciates very quickly. So in about a 5-6 year period of time, it zeroes out. Now, BB&T in this case has an investment. They're going to want to replenish their equipment. But know if a data center comes in, you're going to see a very high initial value, and you're just going to plan for the future as far as the revenue, Justin.
Yeah, I think it's really important to know manufacturing depreciates usually about 15 years. This could be anywhere from, like you said, 7 years or less. So yes, I wanted to talk about one of the challenges. So what happens if they don't redo their equipment? Technology changes. Things are happening at a smaller scale. What I always say, it doesn't matter whether it's advanced manufacturing, it doesn't matter whether it's a data center, it doesn't matter if it's a small business. You always have to have a backup plan for that building. So what would you get if those people gave you 7 years and then walked away and didn't do the equipment? Now, 9 times out of 10, they're transferring their equipment. But this is where some of the unknowns are, right? And it depends on the data center that's located. So if for some reason they say, okay, we're not redoing their equipment, technology's changed, something, the bubble is changed, as the trend is going elsewhere, then you have a brand new building that has high ceilings and you need to have a plan for it. So what can it be used for? So these are some of the things. So that's one of the challenges that you have to think of as a community. Do you have a backup plan?
So our word of advice here is, given how quickly that equipment depreciates, don't necessarily get used to it. Be prepared for it. One of the things that we talk about in the town of Zedman is we add in reserves to cover in case they did not replenish. They've been there long enough where they have replenished because it's value high that it doesn't necessarily have to be paid. For us, this brought in relatively speaking a lot of revenue for us. And for the time, having an additional $2 million every year was important for us. We needed it. As a very specific example, we were providing fire service not only to the town, but to the unincorporated areas in the county surrounding. We had fire equipment 20 years old, pumper truck. We had a ladder truck, 30 years old. I had legitimate concerns that thing would turn over. And so there is a revenue that does come with this. Again, it's something that you'll have to weigh about whether that's of value. Now, as far as some of the lessons that we learned, one of the things we did not have in our development ordinance is a data center. And so that caused us to get that up to date, not only to include data centers, but also to include other types of developments. So as an example, put in landscape buffers. That landscape buffer was not universal for some types of development. We didn't need something wide or thick like that picture shows. But there were some types of development we didn't want to see it. And we wanted to not only screen it, but attenuate the noise. And so that's an example of a very thick screening landscape buffer standard. And then, as I mentioned, with the BB&T data center site, was concerned about runoff, but also runoff in any type of development. And so we put into plans that if you were going to have totally impervious surface, which is just water runs off, We were gonna make you put in a detention pond, but we would also give you credit if you put in something where the water can come through, pay goes like that. So those are just two examples of standards to have in place to be prepared if they do come, that you've got something in your toolbox that you can present to them.
I want to bring up the noise level. So in this region, y'all are very familiar probably with Purdue. You're familiar with Purdue? Okay. So you know the hum that I don't know, some people don't even hear it anymore. But if you actually go up to Purdue, when I first arrived in the county 7 years ago, I can hear it, and people, the residents, didn't even know what I was talking about. But it is a manufacturing, and it is a hum. It is their cooling system. It is humming. Okay, so you do hear that hum. Now, can you hear it inside your home? Typically, no. But if you step outside your home, you will hear that hum. When it becomes a nuisance is when you have multiple data centers. If you've got 10 that are in a row, then you can hear them. So you do have to take in consideration your community development, your quality of life. But it is just that hum, and most people, because he lives near one, a data center, you get used to it, just like you do with Purdue.
Do you have your standards today address the non-human hearing level of noise? Because what I was hearing today was a lot of it comes up that after it's built, there's the vibrating of the window. Humans don't necessarily hear animals or vibrating the windows. That's a real thing that a lot of standards have been put in place. One town said they had changed their reports 3 times, and so I've got it right to limit that. They basically have a means of going out and measuring that to keep that from impacting people up to 2 miles away. Even if you address the normal up to 85 dB decibels or whatever, you still have the potential of non-human hearing level noise or what we call vibration that comes along with it. And they said they've had to adjust it. Do y'all have that? Is that
No, we are, and that's not to say we shouldn't, and I'm going to get to this in a minute. Once you adopt ordinances, it's not one and done. You are constantly going to learn, not only from your direct experiences, like, well, we tried to get that right, but we didn't get it right. Or you will hear from others who have had the experience, and you go back and you modify it. That specific element is, now I've been away from Zeglin coming up on 3 years, so maybe something's been put in, but when I was there, we didn't get to that level of detail. Not to say it's not valid, not to say you would not come back and put something like that.
I know the county, and they said that the companies, and I mentioned this a few months ago, these companies, they have the money for lots of lawyers. And one community said that they came in and they thought they had their standards very well enough. They wanted to have a data center or something similar brought in. And they researched their ordinances well enough. They came in and submitted it and asked for it as a warehouse facility because there weren't enough people in there and beat the ordinance, so to speak. Do you have any experience with that? Did y'all have to do with that? Is that
No.
and basically coming in and saying, hey, well, your classification says you can't have no manufacturing. So with ours is effectively a warehouse because we're just storing equipment in there and there's only 10 people a day. I mean, those are issues that I'd like for us to address. I'm not trying to pick apart
That's
these
okay.
things, but
That's why we're here.
we
That's why we're here.
safeguard ourselves. And if you put in place standards like that, it'd be nice to know if somebody's already done that. The town right across the state line from us said today that they were on version 4 of their zoning revisions because they're trying to stay ahead and they keep getting picked apart by the data center submissions.
Right. Well, one of the suggestions that I would suggest this group, as you're in your moratorium, there's 2 places that you can visit. Number 1, you can visit Zebulon, and you can hear the small data center. And you can go to Loudoun County and hear the 20 or so of data centers that they have. And they have hyperscalers. They have a lot, in fact, in Ashburn, if you want the specific area. I'm actually going there in June, and there's also a recording of Loudoun County of the data centers. Probably doesn't do it justice because I have no idea, but that would be a great location for this community, a few community members to visit. He's also giving a webinar. I don't know if y'all received that. He's giving a webinar, I believe next week, on the data centers and talking about what they did in Loudoun County. more than likely, it's gonna be kind of generic, but just talking about it from an economic development standpoint, but it could be something to listen to. Now, keep in mind, they never stopped. They continually kept growing their data center, projects.
I think they had a requirement for static berms, which were the rolling berms, which work well for smooth attenuation. They actually put in a requirement, I think, in Loudoun County.
I figured that's who you're talking about.
They put in a requirement for a shield wall at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So literally, you can have a place that you could have a requirement where a place looks fairly nice, rolling berms and everything, and if the noise is to a certain level, suddenly you would see a 10-foot high concrete wall erected. And in a rural area, some people might think it's a big deal, but others might say, yes, that's our Route 13's industrial development corridor. I don't look so it would have a concrete wall facility in place.
But also keep in mind that Loudoun County is an unusual circumstance. When you have 20+ data centers, that's very unusual for an area because more than likely you're not going to get the power. I can tell you right now, Gates County is not going to get the power for that many data centers. I mean, that's not going to happen. So you have to put things on scale. That's why I'm saying visiting is a great thing to do.
So let me talk about Zebulon. The reason I'm talking about Zebulon is not because it's the gold standard, it's because I've got experience that I can share with you. As Kelly's talked about with Loudoun County, any of those communities in that data center alley, and I think Fredericksburg is a really good example of a community that has gone out, learned lessons, modified, learned lessons, and modified. Anything where you can learn from others that have been early in the process and have to adapt, I think there's a lot of value in doing that. The standards, though, as important as they are, in my opinion, pale to this, which is land use designation and permitting processes. So I'm going to talk about that land use for a minute. So one of the things that we talked about in Zebulon is we had the US 64 corridor and then 264 down to Wilson. And then you can't really make it out, but there's a line right in there. That's the old rail line, okay? And what we said is, okay, for these heavy industries, we're okay if you're going to be in this area between a railroad and a highway, or as I pointed out in Zebulon, you're going to be near the interstate in a place that can't be developed. And then how that translates to the permitting process. So as an example, this line up here, if you can't read it, so restaurant, walk up home, okay? So we didn't have really any restaurants in Zebulon. We had no places where people could go and sit down. We wanted that. So the permitting process for that, for these particular areas, so it could be in general commercial, as an example in this area. It's a P, it's permitted, okay? You still have to apply standards. You still get reviewed, but it's a permissible use. Now, for some other areas, let's say a controversial one, asphalt or concrete plant, okay? For data centers, these are the things that cause communities a lot of concern, okay? In Zebulon, what we said is they aren't allowed anywhere except for these two areas, which is light industrial and heavy industrial. And even in those cases, you got to go through a special use. And special use is not only more rigorous review, but a higher level of standards and threshold that they have to meet. And then again, I already talked about it. Anything with dash, you just can't do it. More optimistically, again, based upon this development and other developments, we were able to develop a community-wide strategic plan that had a lot of inputs, focus groups. I would encourage you, if you do something like this, and you have focus groups, which I also recommend, make sure you include your youth, specifically your middle schoolers, your high schoolers. They are the ones that are at highest risk of leaving the community, so you want to get a sense of what they like and what we keep them in. For us, it got us to focus on having a vibrant downtown. We had a lot of vacant buildings, so we wanted to get those populated in. No matter how big we got, and so at the time we were 3,900, Over 9 years, we grew to 12,900. We wanted to maintain a small town life. We did that through a lot of ways, through our Parks and Recreation and Cultural Resources program to bring people, no matter whether they had been there forever or just got here as soon as they can. And then the Grow and Smart, which was, if you were going to come into our community, we would love to have you. If you are going to negatively impact us, you're going to have to pay for your impact, like water or traffic, and you're going to have to meet threshold of standards that are not going to be impactful to other people. So the key takeaway is, while it may not appear that way, you have a lot of control in your hands. The key thing is to be.
I want to make a point when he said special use. Most of the communities throughout the state are making the data center special use. If they want to consider it case by case. So if that is not part of your land use plan today, I would really encourage you to research that, because a special use gives the ability for everything to go in front of planning and then go in front of your board. So you get two separate individuals looking at it, and you get to really research it. And with a special use, typically speaking, with data centers, it can be a yes and it can be a no. So it gives you options.
All right, and then what I would leave you all is what I'm going to phrase as phase next steps. And so the very first phase, well, phase one generally is on this side, phase two is on this, but the most critical part of phase one is for you all as a community, more specifically as elected officials, start having conversations about what types of jobs you want, number of skill sets, minimum wages, what type of revenue you're looking for or you're not interested in. These are not necessarily mutually exclusive. You can consider and should consider both. And you shouldn't be thinking that it's just industry. So I haven't talked about it much at all, but when I was city manager in the ward, the paper mill closed down, that community completely changed their economy and realized that the things that made the paper mill come there was the woods and water. And so that community cashed in on their forest and their access to rivers and became a tourism-based economy. And that generated more mom and pop kind of shops. So not a ton of jobs, but local jobs, local owners that would move into downtown, and they would hire some staff to help them on the show or something like that. So that's the very first conversation. Where are you on jobs, revenue? And then start talking about, going back to that chart, start talking about what's going to be a clear regulatory path. And honestly, what is it? Clarity is kindness. If you have things that you don't want, and you can't say you can't have many, okay? You always have to have a spot for something to do somewhere. But if you only want this one kind of thing, only allowed in one section of town, you will send a message to the developer that says, you know what, it's not worth it. We're not going to invest in time. They may be willing to invest in time if something is a special use, just as long as they know what the permitting process looks like, what the standards are. And again, if this is something you really want, then the standards are maybe lower, and the permitting process is quicker. And then whatever you do as far as your standards, just make sure that they're rational expectations. So there will be general standards that all development you will want them to apply to. There's going to be some types of uses you're going to want specific standards. So if it is a noise generator, then a standard could be rolling hills with a noise wall, as an example for use specific standards. And then moving on to phase two, this is there to focus on, but when you get further down the road, talk about impact fees. Like when someone comes in, what are they going to pay you to offset the traffic congestion? What are they going to pay you to, so again, with a residential subdivision, bringing in a lot of people and you care about small town life, which depends a lot on recreation. You need to build a park or expand a park or build athletic facility, then that development pays it in, actually to help them do that. And then the last thing, this is on the very last end, higher level, use water or utilities to your advantage. And so one of the things that we do is everyone got a base entitlement, like you get so many gallons per day. But if you have a denser development, or you have a type of development that is going to need more, then we're going to enter into a negotiation where we'll give you a bonus entitlement, or we're going to get some things for it. Those things can be, so as an example, we need a greenway put in here. We need something in the community, not necessarily directly related to the site, although it can apply to the site.
I just want to summarize a couple points too. When I was talking about community reinvestment earlier in that package, what they can bring to the table. When I say that data centers want a tax incentive, most do. One of the ways that you don't want a data center, don't give tax incentive. That's number one. If you do want a data center, and you decide you're going to give a tax incentive, even though across the state this is a big topic, should we be giving the tax incentive? But if you decide that you want one and you want to give a tax incentive, make sure that that community reinvestment replaces that, and make sure that the agreement with them and any operating agreement refers to that completely, because those are the areas where you can have some challenges. Because if they do not re-up their equipment, then you have a building and you have to decide what you're going to do with that building. So you're in control. I think that's kind of what we're trying to say. You're in control for your land use plan and your community reinvestment benefit in your conversation. You're in control to say no, or you're in control to say yes. And we want to make sure that you're prepared every step of the way. So as you get one, each one is going to be different, so you have to walk through that process.
And then, putting up on the so while this gives you the impression of a timeline, a linear timeline, it doesn't have to look like this. But what I'm trying to convey is this would be the associated steps with the next steps. So continue what you're doing like you are tonight, have a workshop, get informed, start having a conversation, not only internally, but back in the community. Put something out there for public consumption and critique by your community, by getting the public to vet it and give you some comments. The day will come when you have your land use plan and your zoning plan and your ordinances ready to be adopted. They will have to have a public hearing where you'll get more feedback, and then the time comes to make a decision. And as I tried to convey, this will not be a one and done. You will track how well or it's not working in your community. You will learn from other communities. In the case of data centers, I would again look at Data Center Alley. And then as you learn lessons, either internally or from others, you just have that as part of your process to modify, whether it's modify the standards, modify the land use, modify the permitting process. And so with that, we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
So for me, we talked about community feedback, that kind of thing, early feedback. Roughly 60 people I've talked to in the past 2 weeks. One wants us to pursue learning more about them. 55 to 59 or so of them, 100% against it. Regardless of anything else, as far as elected officials go, we are here to be the voice of the people. The people are very against this. What do they want? They want jobs. They don't want a building that might sit empty in 7 years. They don't want to lose that peaceful community. Let's talk about a low hum, that kind of thing. It's peaceful out here. I love Zebulon, love visiting it. We don't want to be that. And I think that that's the consensus of our community. And so I do appreciate our community wants jobs. And they don't want, you talk about middle school, bringing them in. I went to career day at middle school this fall semester, this school year. Asked the middle schoolers, what do you like about Gates County, or what would make you want to stay here? The things that they said were, we want community gardens. We don't want the trees to go away. We want more trees. We want restaurants, and we're going to need jobs, but we like the wildlife. This is coming from kids. So we're talking about what they want. They want what we have. They just want the opportunity to make a sustainable living and stay here. 10 jobs isn't enticing.
Right.
Revenue is great, but revenue will come with jobs when we have job opportunities for them. So I think like information is important. We're going to keep pursuing information, but when we're looking at voicing the community and being the voice for the community, I think all of the points that we're seeing or that we're being presented as positives are actually negatives for us. That's not what we want.
That's okay. No, that's okay.
And maybe my other board members in here disagree, but that's the consensus I'm getting from people. That's the feedback I'm getting is we want to keep that peaceful, not get used to a hum. We don't want a hum.
Let me ask you this, do you want manufacturing or do you not want manufacturing either? Because that does bring the jobs.
Right. But there's a difference in a light manufacturing and heavy manufacturing. There's a difference in locations. We don't have a highway buffer. We don't have a railroad buffer. We don't have those kind of sound buffers, and we don't want those kind of sound buffers. So when we're looking at opportunities for the county, we want to stay true to agriculture. Farmers don't want this. We want to stay true to our hunting community. Our hunters don't want this. That is who we are. That is the heart of who we are. And understanding the heart of Gates County and trying to move forward and grow in a way that is best for us, we can't take those things away from the people that don't want us to change. And the majority don't want us to change in that way. Jobs can be brought in without this, and this doesn't bring jobs. So I think that that's one of the key points. At the beginning, you had mentioned we need to decide where we want to be, and jobs would be where we want to be.
I'm thinking that if you don't want that, then your land use and your comprehensive strategy plan better say that.
Yeah.
And in the legal way that it can say that. Right? Because if you don't want that kind of growth, you got to protect what you have.
Right.
Okay? So it still comes back to this. Because regardless of what you do want, whether it's tourism and small business or whatever it is, you need to have the documents to protect you so you can't say no.
Right.
That's what's important.
And that honestly, I think, was more where our head was at with this moratorium, was to give us the opportunity to kind of develop around what we know we want. We have looked into this. We have a strategic plan that's happening, getting ready to send surveys out to the community, but our phones have been ringing 100% of the day, and messages coming in and those things happening, and the things are saying, we need jobs. We don't need this. You mentioned the building could be sitting empty in 7 years. We have a grocery store sitting empty in the middle of Gatesville right now that has been there for years. We don't want something that could very likely be another empty building in 7 years.
And I mean, that could be anything.
It could be, but it sounded like it could be a good option for this. Like that was mentioned a couple times there.
I think, and I mentioned that, but what I'm saying is that can be with anything.
Yeah.
A manufacturer of tobacco, anything can leave, and you have to pivot, and you have to have other plans. And then with other things that you have to determine, okay, so if you don't want the heavy manufacturing, like Perfect County has for steel, okay, and the new one, Project Green Lantern, and if you don't want the heavy and you want to go with some type of light or food processing or agri-business park, or whatever it is that you decide you want to be, or tourism with your hunting in your state park, you just have to have the ability to be able to say yes or no to the other things that are knocking at your door.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And then taking into consideration too, the water, we've had a distressed water system. We've had different things, anything else to put pool on water, because we are making progress, but we still have quite a ways to go. The electricity is another concern that people have had. The electricity bills now out here are astronomical for the majority of the county, and anything that pulls more electricity, anything like that, is just concerning to people. Like the power seems to be a hot topic issue. So light industrial, I think, per conversations in the community, seems to be the direction that is wanted. Heavy industry is not what I'm getting feedback on, and data centers are absolutely not near the top of the list. But I'm gonna hush and let my other board members kick in.
Yeah, I mean, we make all good points, and number one, we're here to protect what Gates County is, the heart of Gates County. A lot of us here grew up in this area, and this is why we live here and why we raise our families here. But on the whole other spectrum of things, To me, it's not about the assets. It's not about anything other than what type of business, what type of tax base can be brought to Gates County so that way we continue to provide the services that our citizens require of the county to provide. And Mr. Sauer and his team, over this past year that I've been on the board, I got to see a lot of that and the struggles that they go through to make the almighty dollar stretch to be able to maintain the requirements that the state puts on the county, as well as the demands and the needs that the citizens of the county puts back on the county government. And with everything that's going on in Raleigh now, with them more than likely it's probably going to pass where they're going to limit the amount of revenues the county can draw from their tax base. If we don't do something, then we're going to have to cut somewhere. And the only place you can cut is where you spend money. And so we already have a tight budget as it is. If we don't have some type of a strategy for the future to bring additional tax base into the county, the amount of money that the county is going to have is going to get reduced because of the decision making that's being made in the wrong level about it. And so we have to be forward thinking and we have to be understanding of where our culture is at. At the same time, we have to build off of that to give us more of a tax base and to give the residents of the county a tax break with their property taxes. If you bring in something that is worth $500 million, that's going to reduce your tax base to all your residents. Instead of paying, 68 cents per hundred, maybe we can do like other counties are doing and go as low as 50, 40, 30 cents per hundred. That will do something really good for our county and the residents of our county. And at the same time, just like you said, most companies always pay back to the community that they're part of. And to be able to have that would be great. I'm not saying that this is what we need to do, but we should be enticing other or a larger business within the county so that way we can't have that tax rate.
Gotta grow the tax base in some
Yes.
right? I mean, it's either gonna be through industry or it's going to be through your residents. Because you're gonna have to raise taxes at some point. It is life.
Yeah.
Okay? So in order to not raise taxes, you've gotta have some industry of some sort.
Right.
Yeah.
With due respect to my friends across the aisle, once again different than everybody else. I agree, because I don't think that some position that Raleigh's going to lock down real estate taxes is suddenly doing perfectly. I think they've got some safeguards in this proposed legislation that keeps us from being decimated. It's not like we're not going to make changes. It clearly shows the ability or need to do something. But having said that, I do agree that, I don't think people here want to change their way of life. You just bring a big building with people fishing, migrating in and out and work there. However, I think that they have their industry or something else to do is provide more jobs for people here. They would accept an industry of that, right? That's just my opinion. But I don't think the building with more people is a sound argument just to try and take it for some potential calamity that might occur in the future based on real estate taxes. I mean, and I don't really care about that, but it's just my simplicity. I do think we need to put some type of regulation in place. There is lots of people that are learning hard lessons from this. It sounds like the regular gotten with smaller, what do you call it, niche,
Enterprise.
enterprise.
Right.
And that right there might be palatable, but in general, the negativity associated with these things is sound. All the problems, people are more documenting now, get out, post on Facebook, and everything else. The people that talk on Facebook, they're 10 times louder than the rest of the folks. And so, the distorted perception that what against and all cases and all means, which that might really be the case, and they might really be justified. But I think we need to go to it, when we should be putting in place some standards, and we've now set on this for a few months. But we should be putting in place standards now to say, yeah, you can't come into a legal populace and force us to accept a building we claim is really a warehouse, and pay the bare minimum taxes and force us to accept we need to put in place standards. And also standards that allow us to do the rest of the things that if we are forced into taking, I see a case where if we're not correctly ready, we can be forced into taking one. And in the best case, we should have standards in place to say, okay, well, we're gonna have, sound measure that, 100 yards outside the building, a quarter mile from the building, 2 miles from the building, we're gonna measure not just the human hearing, but below, above the human hearing threshold to make sure that's safe. We've put 1,000 other things, but the question is, where we get those at the time, we both go out and try and harvest that from other places around the country. And that sounds like what we're hearing here is that we need to do is go out and harvest up those requirements ourselves and start trying to put them in place. If that's what we want to do.
I think what's important to know is that for the manufacturing piece, if you decide you want manufacturing, then you all need to start leading with infrastructure.
Right.
And if you don't lead with that piece, you're going to have a harder time to attract these kids, okay? Because they have so many different site selections that they can choose. So you've got to lead with infrastructure and really plan out your infrastructure. Happens to be that Joe is very strong in infrastructure too, so he can comment on that as well. But that's going to be important. And as far as what Zebulon did, I think, and this is just me talking from an economic development standpoint as well, I feel like out of the types of data centers, because we know that AI is not disappearing, but to go with a banking type of data center that's storing their data is probably one of the safest ones, in my mind. I mean, that's just kind of the way I was thinking.
One of the infrastructure argument is counter to infrastructure argument. County just across the state line of our work, we built a $4 million pump station, put in, fortunately, get water and everything, and Curry and Dr. Pepper, after not 20 years there, always got them back.
And that happens as
So
well.
building infrastructure and saying, if you build it, they will come. I'm sorry, I'm not thinking about
Well,
it. I'm not buying that.
I don't know if I'm saying build it and it will come. I'm saying build it because you need it.
I'm saying build it or they definitely won't come.
Okay.
It seems like we're going to jump in and run.
I should shut up.
You're fine.
Go ahead, say it.
So to your point, what you don't want to have happen is for the moratorium to expire, and as an example, the data center comes up and you have no protection.
Yeah.
Conversely, it may not be one of these. Okay, but let's just, for the sake of discussion, try to make a point. Let's say you were interested in biotech. Okay. I'm not saying you won't, okay? I'm just trying to make a point. If you were interested, we would want to have a conversation with you that assesses what does your water and sewer capacity look like? What does your acreage look like? Just to give you an idea of whether it's a viable option for you. And if it's not a viable option, but you're still interested, this is how long it's going to take. Or what is the industry? So I think Bavard is a good example of that. That recognize that we just want to preserve and protect what we got, but we don't want a burdensome tax rate. So what industry, not listed here, achieves that provides the job and keeps the quality of the place? But again, what you don't want is have nothing, and then the tranche of lawyers show up and they steal it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
We're good. I'm looking to see if anybody else. Yeah.
Thank you
We got-
so much for coming.
I appreciate you if I come across the thing and y'all.
No, we do. Yeah, I agree. Information's good.
It doesn't matter whether you want or you don't want or you're undecided. It's good discussion.
information is good for sure, but I feel like that confirmed that we're in a different direction than a data center.
Here's our contact information. If you want to reach out and contact either one of us, we're happy to take
It's
a
like, I'm
call.
gonna take a picture, but I assume Lisa.